when we consider how context can be a significant factor in the quality of an experience, we can break that down into multiple aspects. And I want to talk now about some of those aspects at the characteristics and behavior level. So these are aspects that we can observe as designers, things that we can measure, those components that are part of the experience, driven by the context, that are more quantifiable than experience level aspects. So going through each of these, give you some examples. First, we talk about location. Location can be a factor in experience because if I am located in Chicago, or if I'm located in a very remote part of Africa, the location I'm in will probably have some kind of bearing on, say, access to water or cell phone signal or a culture that I'm familiar with. So the location where an experience happens can be a significant factor in changing that experience depending on the person and depending on the activity. I know personally, when I am at a cabin in Utah, my feelings and willingness to relax, I guess, I'm more relaxed. I'm much more likely to, ponder and dream than I am on a subway when I am rolling through a very busy train terminal or something like that. So consider location. Every location brings with it its own challenges and advantages, and location can really shape the entire experience. So really consider those. Next is laws. So in every location, there are a set of laws, and I want you to think about laws in a few different ways. First, consider how laws that are social, that are driven by people groups who set up governments or localities, municipalities that create laws, how those kinds of laws can impact an experience. So a good example here is if the laws state that the drinking age is 21, but I want to create a bar, then it's a given that customers at my bar are likely going to be 21 or up. It's going to be really hard to get anyone to come in there who is younger than 21 if my bar is focused on selling alcoholic beverages. Now, if the age for drinking is at 18, then that changes some of the experience and some of the options. Laws when it comes to traffic behavior or drinking age, laws that pertain to sex, gender, and really rights in different places of people with different makeup. Those laws can drastically impact what's legal, what's not legal, and what's possible. There are also other laws to consider, and those are the laws of nature. I know it may sound a little bit far-fetched, but don't forget that there are laws of gravity and laws that pertain to how the physical world works that we can't ignore as designers. And I will say this sometimes comes up with earlier career designers who come up with ideas or designs or concepts that I've had to give feedback like, yeah, this is a cool idea and I like how you've built this structure, but there's no way it could survive in an environment like this where the laws the material you're using just won't hold up to the weight. So there are definitely laws when it comes to materials and what they can stand up to and gravity and other components that must be adhered to. Doesn't come up as often, but every once in a while I've seen projects and seen ideas where I was like, man, that's a cool idea. It's a shame that it's just not possible. Faster than light travel, right? And when we talk about science fiction, sorry, cool idea, not possible. So another aspect is size of a context. So I'll give you an example here. Some contexts, such as a crawl space underneath a house or a ride vehicle, when I'm strapped into a ride vehicle very tight in an enclosed space, these small spaces can be very scary for some individuals and can affect their experience, or really they just won't even use the design in the first place because that space is so small. Another example is large space. A very large space, a significant vast plain, or a large city. So a very large expansive space can sometimes inspire feelings of awe or feelings of being small. So the context that surrounds people and its size and proximity, as far as being tight, being open, can be a factor. Ideally, we want to design whatever we create, product, service, or system, where it matches the context where we are implementing it. Okay, so let's move on to another aspect, is non-user actors. So when I did some research on this, I was reading work by design researchers and designers talking about how we design human-centered design, but a lot of times we forget those who are not humans. We neglect to consider the environment, or consider animals, or consider other factors of an experience that maybe are not about the user, not about the experiencer or their direct contacts, but those that are further afield, including other living beings and other actors. So I call this non-user actors. I'll give you an example. If I am walking through a park and it's a beautiful day and I am doing the activity of roller skating, let's say. So I'm not walking through a park, I'm roller skating through a park, which is awesome. A non-user actor might be a very large, let's say a Weimaraner dog that is very rambunctious and is running all over the place and darts in front of me. So that Weimaraner dog is not an actor. It is not a participant in the experience of roller skating. I am the only one who's really roller skating, and there are people around and stuff like that. But this dog now became a very real part in my experience and impacted my ability to roller skate safely, and probably impacted my knees and elbows being scraped up if I weren't wearing knee pads and elbow pads. So non-user actors are individuals and beings that are not the experiencer and not direct operants of the experience, and not employees and stuff like that, but those who are a little further afield that still are components of an experience, or still parts of that experience, and can be aspects that shape an experience. So whenever you're designing, consider carefully, if I'm going to implement, let's say, this service in this space, who are the actors that I can't remove that are part of this context, but still could be factors, and how will they impact what I'm trying to implement? So moving on, the last characteristic is available resources. So within every context, there are resources available to us as designers and to those who are moving through that space and in those contexts. Right now, the resource of air, being able to breathe, is definitely a factor in me being alive. If the quality of that air were reduced, so if the available resource of clean air for breathing were reduced because of forest fires, then my experience would be significantly different. It would be harder for me to be able to present my ideas to you and to shoot a video to help you learn some of these ideas. So available resources in some spaces are more precious and really more important and considerable than others. I'll give you an example of a subway station. I use this one a bunch. So if I were designing a mobile app for navigating around let's say a subway system, getting around a city, and if I didn't account for Wi-Fi availability, let's say there's no Wi-Fi available down low in a subway system, and I designed an app that had to be used using a cellular signal. The available resource I'm looking for is cell signal. If I designed an app for people underground, it would be a lousy experience because they would not be able to get cell signal. And if there were no Wi-Fi, then they couldn't even use the app. So whenever designing for context and considering context, carefully consider what resources am I counting on for my design? What things am I saying, yes, I need this resource, water, air, Wi-Fi, signal, whatever that resource is. I need it to be there for my design to function properly. If you neglect to account for those available resources or misjudge, then likely the experience will suffer. And if we account for resources that are scarce, then we might be able to design to protect resources, to extend resources, or at least to match the available resources in a certain context. So now I'm going to skip on to two different behaviors. So the way the context behaves. So I use the term behave simply as a way of recognizing sometimes components like people, design, and context can behave differently. They can change. The conditions in them can be variable. So first is climate. So in a context, climate, I guess the first idea we go to is temperature, weather, conditions like that. And yes, the conditions in a climate can be a significant factor for design. So whenever you're designing, consider a location and consider its climate, because if you're designing for Florida in the summer, let's do an outdoor dining concept where people are eating outside and enjoying very hot, sticky weather that sometimes has storms every day at about 3 o'clock. I know this is a gross generalization for those who know Florida or live there, but we do need to account for the climate, because those conditions will probably mean that as designers, we need to put some kind of creature comfort into that space to reduce or to improve the experience, to reduce the discomfort, because the climate is formidable. So consider climate as the physical climate. Also consider climate as a political climate, or a climate of feeling or emotions, or of matters that are on people's minds. To give you an example, when an economy is experiencing, say, distress, so high inflation. So high inflation can cause individuals, a climate of high inflation can cause individuals to choose not to buy or to make other purchasing decisions. Sometimes it can inject uncertainty at a level of saying, families like, I don't know if we want to send our kid to college yet, or we should really consider how we're going to plan for the future, because we don't know if things are going to get any better. Right now, the economic climate is such that I'm really worried. So a climate that is physical, or a climate that is in people's minds, or driven by political unrest, economic change. Certainly we've seen a pandemic. That kind of climate can impact people's experience and their willingness or likelihood to make different decisions and how they feel about those decisions. So the last aspect, and this one also a behavior aspect, is the behavior of sensory. So the sensory behavior of a context. So when I say sensory behavior, I mean how noisy, how bright, how windy, how like every kind of sense we're talking about. Is it a loud room? Those sensory moments of negative, being very loud, could be if I'm trying to study in a context and those loud noises cause a problem. On the flip side, a very loud context, like a very loud concert, let's say a rock show, a rock concert, could be a good thing, where I want the sensory activity to be super rich. I want this concert venue to have bright lights, smoke machines. I want it to have lots of loud. I want it to smell like beer. Like all of this sensory stuff can heighten an experience, can enhance the concert going experience, all driven by the context. So consider sensory material in a context, because the sensory can plus or can challenge an experience, all driven by context. So a few parting words on that. Most of the time when we talk about context as designers, there are things that we cannot control, things we must account for. So as you're designing with context in mind, carefully consider each of these aspects, these characteristic and behavior aspects. What are the ones that are beyond your control? Which ones do you need to design to account for? Which ones could be deal breakers or challenges for the people that are in that context? If you carefully consider characteristics and behavior and can design to impact or reduce those negative consequences of aspects in those contexts, then you're far more likely to produce a positive or desirable experience in those who are in those spaces.